Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr for the first time in a long time. It feels like, Tom, it's been a while since we've done this. We are currently sitting in a hotel room in Los Angeles, and as I look out the window right now, I can actually see the Hollywood sign, which we didn't discover last night. We just discovered it today. Although to say we discovered it is, we saw it out the window.
It wasn't like Christopher Columbus kind of. It was exciting. Maybe they will rename this city Los Gerdeman. That would be pretty exciting for your big discovery.
Yeah, I'll have to get up there and plant a flag a la Baker Mayfield. Although it is on a hill, it will require some hiking. So I don't think I'm going to do it. They can have it. All of these Hollywood elites. That's not for me. So there's a lot to talk about, Tom. We've already decided that we'd like to make this a 48-minute show, but it's probably going to be like 3 hours. We've got, since the last time we talked, we had Urban Meyer as an AD, assistant AD, Dwayne Haskins, first-round pick, which we kind of knew. We only touched on the Justin Fields stuff. Signing day, Zach Harrison, Dwan Mathis, and also the Rose Bowl. So there's a lot going on. First, though, Tom, let's start with Urban Meyer, which this has been alluded to. I think Isaiah Prince even almost said he was going to be an assistant athletic director during interviews a week or so ago. And it's not like this. I would see reports like Urban Meyer is named the assistant athletic director, and there's no such thing as the assistant athletic director at Ohio State. There's like 25 of them. I don't know. Mickey Marotti is an assistant athletic director. I think it's not quite hood ornament, or not quite mascot. It's more a fundraiser, well-wisher, pep talker, and all around just hanger on in a good way.
Yeah, I don't think this was a big surprise. Gene Smith had kind of talked about this in sort of vague terms during Urban's retirement press conference, and sort of said, "Yeah, I'm looking forward to working with you and doing outreach with our 36 varsity coaches and blah, blah, blah." And they still haven't exactly said what he's going to do, but it sure seems like he's going to do a lot of handshaking, fundraising, maybe go give teams pep talks, but, the week before the rowing team rows against Michigan and the basketball team plays Michigan and the whatever. But
isn't wrestling undefeated with him?
It is. Wrestling is undefeated with Urban Meyer at Matt's
So just imagine what he could do for the rowing program. Fencing is pretty good. Synchronized swimming doesn't need him, but if you have Urban Meyer giving pep talks to synchronized swimmers, they could probably win a water polo national. Like they could, all pool sports, they would just take over. And I'm not talking just women's water polo, men's as well. So you get Urban Meyer talking those dudes up, not dudes. That team up, and there's no telling what they could do. Diving, even synchronized diving, which is a real thing. Urban Meyer could have Ohio State's entire athletic program aquatic and substantial and dominating.
It'll be really amazing when Ohio State goes a combined 364-0 next year in all sports. I think that we're in California right now, so I think it's just fair that this is probably an appropriate time to just say Pac-12, your days as the Conference of Champions are over.
Maybe go to land sports, people, because Ohio State's coming for you. Urban Meyer is bringing the water, bringing the heat, and you are going down.
The only concern with water polo is, will his motivation be able to carry over to also motivate the horses? Or, they're a big part of that sport, as I understand.
Yeah, but you hit them hard enough, and they'll be motivated. So, I don't watch a lot of water polo because I think it's cruel to the animals. But yeah,
because I don't get Pac-12 Network.
Thanks a lot, Larry Scott. So yeah, I don't. I mean, it was the natural progression, I guess. I know Gene Smith, I think, talked to Cleveland.com and expressed some concern that Urban would hang around too much with football. And if he did that, he would have to tell him to back off a little bit. This is Ryan Day's program. Let him be. do you think there's any part of Ryan Day that is like, you're around here too much? Like, did Brett Bielema, did he get annoyed by having Barry Alvarez around? Gary Anderson didn't seem to care for it. If Urban Meyer becomes Ohio State's Barry Alvarez, I don't think that's a bad thing unless because I think Barry Alvarez is very good for Wisconsin. I don't know that Ohio State needs a Barry Alvarez. So maybe Urban needs to be more spread out than just hanging around Ryan Day, stopping by at 4:30 before like Ryan Day goes home or whatever. Not 4:30 because they're still doing practice, but like 5 minutes before Ryan Day's like, all right, time to get out of the office. And then Urban walks in, and 6 hours later, he finally gets to go home.
After 6 hours of detailed discussion about punt team, I think, I don't envision that being an issue because I think that first of all, Urban is going to want to spend time with his family and being not a college football coach for a while, which, that he has earned that for sure, and that sounded like that was a pretty big motivation for him. So he's not going to be around nearly as much as he is right now. Plus, if he's got fundraising responsibilities and he's going to inspire the horses on the water polo team, then that's going to take him away from football. And I don't think that it's going to be an issue. I don't envision that being an issue. Barry Alvarez, you're right. There have been very, very consistent reports that has been an issue for people, that he's just always hanging around and always has input on stuff. And Paul Chryst seems to be fine with it. But yeah, Bielema didn't like it. Gary Anderson didn't like it. I mean, Gary Anderson going from Wisconsin to Oregon State tells you that was, I want to get out of here right now, and I don't care where I go. So I guess it's a little bit of a concern, but the difference here is there's no one above Barry Alvarez in the Wisconsin athletic department. Gene Smith is above Urban Meyer in the OSU athletic department still, and the relationship that Gene Smith and Urban Meyer have, it doesn't seem like Gene Smith's going to be concerned about saying, all right, like, dial it back if it does become an issue. I don't really think it's going to be, but I don't think Gene Smith's going to have an issue saying that, and I don't think that Urban Meyer is probably going to take offense to that just based on it. It sure sounds like they're really very personally close. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of person that can pull you aside and say, hey, look, you got to do this a little differently, and you won't necessarily get super angry about it.
Plus, if like Gene Smith sets goals, like, I need you to raise this many millions, I need you to keep this many dozen horses from dying. Like, if he can meet those goals, he's very goal oriented. Remember how wanting to be undefeated almost cost him his career. Like, if he can go into a water polo season wanting no horse deaths, imagine how driven he will be to make that happen. And when he does make that happen, then it's like, well, now I got to do it again next year. No more horse deaths 2 years in a row. And, I just raised $40 million. Next year, I got to raise $50 million. Although you don't have to raise as much money if you're killing fewer horses.
That's true. I just had this vision in my head of someone like accidentally scrubbing like 7 minutes into the podcast, and you're just suddenly talking about horses drowning, and people are going, "What did I?"
Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast.
Yeah, it's. I think it's going to be. I think that has the potential to have some real serious upside. You keep him around. He's there to just kind of help. Hey, it's a big recruiting weekend. Oh, hey, Urban Meyer happened to be in the office to stop by and say hi. He's still a name. He's going to be a name. People talk about older coaches. A lot of players today probably don't necessarily remember Jim Tressel all that well, and certainly don't remember national champion Jim Tressel. They're all going to know Urban Meyer. Everybody knows Urban Meyer, and everyone's going to know Urban Meyer for the next 5-10 years. So having him around is potentially going to be an asset in recruiting as well.
And talking to the players, we talked to 4 or 5 members of the Ohio State defense on Thursday morning, and I asked a couple of them, what's your favorite memory or moment with Urban? And they would continue to call him a legend. So that gives you an idea of what today's players view him as. And so, recruits coming in now and for the next decade, ish, 7 years maybe is maybe the max. They're going to know him. I do wonder if Gene Smith is not going to be Ohio State's AD forever. Eventually, he's going to retire, and it has been suggested to me that it may not be much longer. Is this grooming Urban Meyer to be Ohio State's athletic director? Is that something? It's something that can take up a lot of your time, which Urban has said he hopes he falls in love with something in retirement. Maybe he would be so occupied, although being occupied is not the same as falling in love with something. I just wonder if I don't want to say business side of it, but he always talks about wanting to improve the student athletes and making their lives better. You really, as the athletic director, I think that's maybe only second to the coach in terms of what you're going to being able to accomplish that, but you can accomplish it in larger numbers as the athletic director.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could be. I could see him taking that kind of role, especially give it a year or two. If it's a year or two with Gene Smith, he can take some time, figure out if he does like it. They can sort of do an evaluation of here's what you're good at, here's what you're not good at. Because there's going to be a lot of the stuff. I mean, he has a master's, but he doesn't have a master's in business administration. He's not used to being the CEO of, a financial organization like the athletic department is. He's been the CEO of a football program, and a pretty darn good one for a couple decades now. So I think that's something that he could, if you put the right people around him to kind of manage, like how an NBA GM has a cap guy. Like you have the cap guy to handle all the cap stuff because the GM doesn't know he knows the personnel, but he doesn't know the financial side. Same kind of thing for Urban Meyer there. I think there is a way that if he likes it and if he decides this is what he wants to do, I don't think I don't get the sense there's a lot of things in his life that Urban Meyer has failed at. So I would think that there's probably a pretty good chance that if he does decide this is what he wants to do, that he'd probably be pretty good at it.
You figure his biggest failure as a head coach is Bowling Green, which was an immense success, and got him to Utah and then Florida. So yeah, there's baseball.
Yeah, I mean he only made the minor leagues. Yeah, he only played as a professional baseball player. What a failure.
Played college football, played professional baseball, but he's not a Hall of Famer, so
right.
Trash. Speaking of future Hall of Famers, we should probably just touch on signing day. We don't need to go over it. We pre-capped it for you last week, but the biggest news coming out of that was the decommitment of Dwan Mathis, the quarterback out of Michigan, who then signed with Georgia, and the signing of five-star defensive end Zach Harrison, which I don't remember Ryan Day's exact words, but to paraphrase, it was a must-get, being that he was a guy from down the street at a position where you can never have enough of. We saw the success of the Ohio State defensive line when they were able to rotate their four guys who will all be in the NFL next year. They weren't as deep this year. They won't be as deep next year or maybe as productive. We'll see how it ends up with their depth. But you had that guy. That was the biggest thing on signing day. I think it was... Now, let me ask you, Tom. Is it bigger than losing Dwan Mathis if you don't also get Justin Fields? Is it better to get this five-star defensive end who is raw but immensely athletic and the clay is there? Is that better than maybe getting no quarterback at all? No, would you rather have the quarterback or the defensive end?
I don't think there's a question that they would, if they had to pick one of them, they would pick Harrison over Mathis, because you need a quarterback in this class. Mathis was not viewed as, he was a very good prospect. They liked him, but he was not viewed as a, generational, transformational kind of prospect. He was a solid quarterback, but he was not the number one player in the country. He wasn't the number one quarterback in the country. He was a good, solid option for them to make sure they have 4 quarterbacks in that room, scholarship quarterbacks in 2019. That's what Ryan Day said he wants. And right now, assuming Dwayne Haskins goes pro, you have 3. So they need to add someone. So if you add Justin Fields, then you've added the number 1 quarterback from last year's class, and you've added the number 4 overall player from this year's class, and you've lost number 8 pro-style quarterback, something like that? I mean, he was a top 10 ranked in the position, but he wasn't number 1 or number 2. I think they would take that every day and twice on Sunday if that was the choice.
Yeah, and Dwan Mathis, you talk to Buckeye fans, and he was just the guy to be there when either Baldwin or Martell handed off to Jack Miller. Mm-hmm. This well before any of the Justin Fields stuff started out. You never heard about, well, just wait till Dwan Mathis gets in this offense. And even his recruitment was a little bit odd. And the entire quarterback, not race, but Ohio State's attempts to get quarterbacks in the 2019 class were odd. When Dwan Mathis shows up under the cover of night at Friday Night Lights, and we're hanging out in the couldn't get into the lobby, outside of the lobby, and he walks past, and you're like, well, he's not supposed to be here, but he is, because we all know how Michigan State feels about their commits visiting. They do not like it, and so he was also previously committed to Iowa State. Kirby Smart tells him, obviously, exactly what he wanted to hear. And one of those things was, you can enroll early, which those who cover recruiting will tell you that they don't think he can, based on various, reasons. Ohio State told him, you can't, for us. And we saw with Justin Fields that Kirby Smart told him exactly what he wanted to hear. And now we've seen how that ended up, where when Kirby Smart was talking about Dwan Mathis on signing day, he was saying Justin Fields is gone. And Justin Fields has not said he's gone, even though he's in the transfer portal. But Georgia has moved on from him, it would seem. And now, if Ohio State can't get Fields, I think that's a huge loss. And can you lose something that you never had? I think in this case, you lost Dwan Mathis because of Justin Fields. Even though Mathis told Detroit Papers, no, it had nothing to do with Justin Fields, but Georgia brought you in because Justin Fields is gone.
Right, and I don't think there's any question. When he said it didn't have to do with Justin Fields, he meant it wasn't the rumors of Justin Fields coming to Ohio State chasing him away, that he was afraid of the depth. The depth chart and how many guys he'd have to fight with to get the starting job. I think there's a pretty good argument to be made that Justin Fields did impact his decision to go to Georgia, because if Justin Fields is gone, then you've got Jake Fromm, and Dwan Mathis is potentially number 2 on the depth chart next year as a true freshman. So I think that from that perspective, Fields probably did impact his choice a little bit.
You mentioned quarterbacks fighting. And I'm imagining Mathis still at Ohio State and his wiry 6'4" frame going up against the stocky, muscled, chiseled 5'11" and a half Tate Martell. And I don't think Tate would have the leverage, the strength, the smarts, the hair, the quickness, the tats. I don't see that being a very fair fight for Dwan Mathis. Break it down.
No, I think you've got it exactly right. I mean, let's start with the hair. It's glorious. It's a thick, lustrous mane. Uh-huh. I'm sure all of our listeners look and just say, I just want to run my hands through it. It just looks like it's a shampoo commercial head of hair. So that alone, I think you gotta give Martell the nod.
Yeah, you don't fight with hair, but I think he could. If anybody would and could, it would be Tate Martell. Now we get into the Tate Martell situation of this whole thing, which is where things get even more complicated. He subtweeted whomever,
someone,
be it. I even had. Well, you can maybe pull it up. But it was either to. I had somebody suggest that he was subtweeting himself even, and that seems a little bit out there. The other would be Justin Fields, and then the other would have been. Okay, you got it?
Yes. The tweet was, word of advice, don't swing and miss, especially not your second time.
Because that was also after Shea Patterson announced that he was returning.
Yes.
And so I could go with that being a Shea Patterson subtweet as opposed to a Justin Fields subtweet. Or we also know Tate Martell is probably the best tweeter in America. It wouldn't surprise me if that's a 2-for-1 subtweet.
It was written so well, you wonder if he was going to law school. Because it was worded so specifically and yet so vaguely that it was like, there's definitely, I can say with 100% certainty, there is absolutely a message here. And I think I know what the message was. But who is it for? I don't know. Maybe
if
someone.
The shoe fits. If you think this is talking about you, you're so vain, you probably think this tweet is about you, don't you? Don't you? Don't you? Yes, it is about you. Now I'm starting to think maybe it's about us.
Oh man! Well, how many times have we swung and missed?
Well, yeah, he mentioned twice, right?
Twice,
we're way past that.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that's reassuring. But if he, and we talked about this on the last show, which was, God, feels like forever now, when the quarterbacks at Ohio State certainly would not maybe like this or wouldn't be happy with it. But they know that Ryan Day wants 4 quarterbacks. So, and I tweeted this last week, Day can certainly and fairly couch this as, I'm not trying to replace you, I'm just trying to get my numbers. And if getting my numbers happens to bring in the number 1 dual threat quarterback from the 2018 class, I'd be crazy not to go after that.
Yeah, and I think that there's a parallel to be drawn here to the Chris Chuganoff edition last year when they were short on scholarships.
I thought you were comparing Chugs and Fields. And
they are both carbon-based life forms and play quarterback at the collegiate level. Chuganoff, I think, came in knowing, okay, I'm not going to be the starter this year. I'm coming in August. He was a grad transfer from West Virginia. They needed another quarterback because Joe Burrow had transferred away. Matthew Baldwin still had a bum knee, so you had 2 healthy scholarship quarterbacks at the beginning of the year. You had Haskins and you had Martell. And with Urban Meyer's quarterbacks being injured because they run, like that is not an infrequent thing for an Urban Meyer quarterback to get injured. If you lost one of those guys and you only have 1 scholarship quarterback, you're really in trouble. So he was kind of a break glass in case of emergency. Bring him in as a transfer. We need a person. Now we have a person. That's the kind of thing where I don't think that probably caused a ripple in the quarterback room. Bringing in the number 1 player in the country, number 1 quarterback in the country, who, I mean, the recruiting services ranked him number 1. Anyone who has seen him says, I mean, like, this is the most universal opinion. It's the most impressive high school quarterback they've ever seen. Yeah. That's anyone you talk to. And this is not like Ohio State people now like retconning this. This was everyone's opinion at the time that this is the most remarkable, transcendent prospect people had seen. So now instead of a guy to come fill out the room, you've got a guy who it sure looks like, if he's eligible for 2019, and that needs to still be determined, if he's eligible for 2019, there's probably I think he probably immediately becomes the favorite to start if Haskins goes.
You could understand if Tate Martell and Matthew Baldwin kind of feel like, imagine, you and your wife, you got some kids, and you're like, you know what, let's get a foreign exchange student, bring him over here. And so you the husband, goes through and you set everything up. And then when a foreign exchange student gets over here, she's a 26-year-old like Swiss model, and your wife looks at you like, really? This is the foreign exchange student you brought here? And you're like, I just want to give everybody the best chance. Honey, we've got to meet our numbers.
Justin Fields, the Justin Fields, the au pair of the quarterback recruiting class.
But you mentioned Chugs, and I think it's a key point. You can't have, and no offense to him, he came in as a backup to be the backup. You can't have 2 of him and then Tate Martell and Matthew Baldwin. You can't have half of your quarterback room be guys that you don't want to play. they don't even want to have one in there, but they had to. I don't want to say they don't want him. You don't want to be in that situation where you have to rely on a graduate transfer. You would like to be able to build everything organically, but with the way quarterbacks transfer now, you can't do that. But you would like at least to be 3-1 guys who you can rely, you are comfortable relying on, as opposed to 2-2, where you're one play away from being one play away from playing the guy who is a couple of steps above the scout team guys. And again, no offense to those guys, but we're talking about national championship teams. And rarely, never are those national championship teams led to a title by a guy who barely has a scholarship.
Right. Ohio State, rather memorably, has won a national championship with its third-string quarterback recently. But the fourth-string quarterback on that team was Stephen Collier, who came in, was not particularly highly rated. I think he was in the 700s or 800s as a player. Three-star prospect, came in, played a little bit. I think I remember him playing in the Hawaii game maybe in 2015, but retired early to go be a grad assistant because he, I think, recognized he was not going to be a quarterback at the next level, so he just wanted to move on to the next step of his career. You can have someone like that, but if you get down to that level, Stephen Collier is probably not leading them to win against Alabama. Yeah. And so you want someone there because Stephen Collier probably could have led them to wins over Illinois and Michigan. They always beat Michigan,
right?
And probably Wisconsin on that one day in Indianapolis, based on the way Wisconsin played. But it will get you to a certain point. It will avoid disaster, and that's when you're down to your fourth quarterback. That's really the goal. Just limit the damage as much as possible, and avoid. Don't let the fire spread to the neighbors' houses. Basically.
Yeah, and when you talk about Cardale, that's the number 3 that you can live with.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have that, and your number 3 is Stephen Collier, then you can't. You pray that nothing happens to J.T. Barrett. You pray that nothing happens to Braxton Miller, but that's really hard when they're carrying the ball 18 times a game. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how much of that offense still sticks around. I think it will be dependent upon the quarterback. The quarterback will likely be different next year with Dwayne Haskins. And it came out last week that he received a first-round grade, which was no surprise. First-round grade from the NFL. They put their names in it, and I think it's like the College Advisory Board. They talk to... there's various members of the NFL teams who are on the board, and they will give you a projection of probable first-rounder, a probable second-rounder, or not a second-rounder. And those are basically that's what they're given to make their decision. They want the players to see that not going the third one, not a probable second-rounder, to mean like come back. But a lot of players will just see it as I'm a third-rounder. All they said was that I was in the first-year round, so I'm pretty sure it's going to be the third-rounder. Haskins gets the first-round grade. On Wednesday or Thursday, Justin Herbert, the Oregon quarterback, who came into the season as probably the number 1 quarterback prospect in the 2019 draft, announced that he is returning. And Tom, I'm thinking he's trying to avoid being in Dwayne Haskins' draft. And he could be the number 1 guy maybe in 2020. Although, I don't know what kind of prospect Tua is. He's small. He's short. Nothing wrong with that, as we know. But he doesn't have the best hair. But
speaking of subtweets.
Justin Herbert, I think he's trying to avoid Dwayne Haskins. Is there any chance that Dwayne Haskins thinks, you know what? This is a pretty good idea. I'm also going to return for my redshirt junior season.
No. Next topic.
Okay.
Yeah, Dwayne Haskins. If Dwayne Haskins came back, I'm trying to think what
He doesn't want to be a New York Giant.
What would be more surprising to me? Then you pull an Eli Manning and you say, I'm not going to go play for you. I'm trying to think of what with the Ohio State program would be more surprising to me than Dwayne Haskins coming back at this point, like a realistic scenario that would be more surprising. I'm J.K. Dobbins transferring, like that would be more surprising. That's not good. You
think he's going to go back home? Is that what you're saying? Tom Herman, you devil.
Yeah, he's tired. He's worried about having to be the only, the sole number one. He really will miss splitting carries with Mike Weber.
I'm such a team player that I want to share carries. And if these guys keep trying to give me 18, 19, 20 carries a game, I'm out of here.
Yeah, I think that's probably about, something along those lines would be more surprising than Dwayne Haskins coming back. But, I mean, I was floored when Cardale Jones came back. I was shocked when Cardale Jones came back. I thought for sure go and what's Cardale Jones's legacy if he's the what's the guy from Damn Yankees, Joe, what's his name? I
don't watch musicals other than Grease.
I was going to say, we just talked about you watching musicals not that long ago. Yeah, he just comes out of nowhere, leads the team to a championship, and then vanishes into the mists after 3 weeks of football.
Joe DiMaggio.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was an actual. I was shocked by that. I would be even more shocked if Haskins comes back. I think there's an argument to be made that sure, another year of reps, you could end up a better prospect long term. But if you're going to be the number 1 or number 2 pick in the draft, go get your money and come back and get your degree later. If you're going to be guaranteed $20 million, get it and worry about everything else later.
The frustrating part is Ohio State was a quarterback away from, and we talked before the season where J.T. Barrett wasn't the quarterback that could beat Clemson or Alabama. We believe Dwayne Haskins could do that. And now he won't get that opportunity just as a one-year starter. So pretty selfish for him to leave when he could totally go and beat Alabama or Clemson next year if he wanted to, but he just doesn't want to. But yeah, you can't. I think Jim Tressel would tell his players, if you're a first rounder, you should go. That was generally his advice. You're looking at $30 million as a top 5 pick. And as a quarterback, you get raised up even a little bit more because you're more valuable. So if you could have the Buckeyes go 1-2 with Nick Bosa and Dwayne Haskins. If there is a team there needing a quarterback, which would be even better than Orlando Pace, Sean Springs going 1-3 in 1997.
Yes. And there's actually a pretty good chance I think that happens at this point because if he's pretty clearly the number 1 quarterback on everyone's board, and I think that he probably will be, then even if the team picking number 2 doesn't need a quarterback, there's probably going to be a couple people knocking on their door trying to get that pick. So I would say there's a pretty decent chance you end up with Buckeyes going 1-2.
Don't ever say picking number 2 again.
Sorry.
Let's just make some rules here now as we go. So yeah, that's Dwayne Haskins. We both expect him to leave. It has been interesting that nothing has come out in terms of he hasn't made an announcement. Usually, it's not unusual for those announcements to be made between now and the bowl game, as we've seen with Draymond and Mike Weber. So maybe some people have hope. Don't fall for it. As I've told people before, expect him to leave. Be thrilled if he comes back, unless you don't like him. Then be angry, which is totally your prerogative. But I can't see any scenario in which he comes back just because you don't come back from stuff like this. You don't. And Matt Leinart at USC made a mistake by being convinced by Pete Carroll to come back.
Matt Barkley.
No, Matt Leinart.
Oh,
because he could have been the number 1 or number 2 overall pick, and he came back and was the number 10 pick for the Cardinals. Barkley too.
Don't be a USC quarterback named Matt and come back. Is I think
at least Mark Sanchez was no, I'm leaving, and he was the number 6 pick, I think. Sure, he was terrible, but he got paid.
He got paid, and that's the number one goal. That get that, and then you worry about the other stuff later.
And I'm sure he's still in the NFL. He'll end up being on TV or something, and maybe go back and get that USC degree and make something of yourself after that. But yeah, there's how could a coach say, Dwayne, I think you should stay?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to hear that from anyone. I mean, I just, like I said, there have been studies in the past that there's a decent correlation between the number of snaps and reps you get at the college level and your success as a pro. And that a lot of the one-year starters are guys who don't end up panning out. That's not universal, but there's some kind of a correlation there. And if you're a long, multi-year starter, you have a better chance of being a good, long career pro. But if you can go get pick number 2, go get pick number 2. Like, just that's not a bad thing. Make your $30 million. If the worst case scenario is, I didn't get to play pro football for more than 4 or 5 years, but I made $30 million. That's not a bad worst case scenario. The other worst case scenario is if you come back, something happens, then you don't get to play, and you don't get to make your $30 million. That's a worst case scenario.
Well, and you think about it, what would you rather do? Only have to work 4 years or work 12 years? I mean, this is easy math. But I'm not convinced that he is going to be a franchise quarterback because of exactly what you said. He's a one-year starter. I would like to see more. Now, everything we've seen has been better than anything else we've seen at Ohio State. We've talked before where if he throws an incomplete pass, you're like, what's wrong? What happened? Who ran the wrong route? Is he feeling well? Stomach flu? What's the problem? So he's made the position look extremely simple. And I still would like to see more. Like, you see 2 seasons of Baker Mayfield at Oklahoma, and you see everything, and you can envision that. You see 1 season of Dwayne Haskins at Ohio State, you see a lot. You also see the struggles, and you would like to see them overcome like the next time. And I think we did see that, but I think I would rather see a larger picture before I think this guy's a franchise quarterback. And as we know, the franchise quarterback drafting is a complete crapshoot anyway. So I could be totally right about this.
You could be.
Thank you, Tom. Let's move on.
I can tell you.
No. Let's move on.
No. I'm going to humble myself here and go back a year to the pre-draft show that we did last spring, and I was 100% sure my strongest opinion involving anything in the draft was don't draft Josh Allen from Wyoming, which has worked out pretty fine. I was also not that high on Baker Mayfield, which history may not judge that position quite as well as the Josh Allen take. So, but that's exactly it. It's like 50-50. Yeah. Like, Josh Rosen has not worked out this year. Baker Mayfield has worked out great. Josh Allen worked out terribly. It just and Sam Darnold, I think, was okay but hurt, right? But it's just you just every year teams spend millions and millions of dollars and tons of hours and research, and they have studies, and they have and it's still a crapshoot because there's just so many variables that go into it.
Jared Goff was terrible, like his rookie year. Now he's a franchise quarterback. Robert Griffin, Vince Young were Pro Bowl quarterbacks as rookies. Mm-hmm. And you see where that went. I was talking with somebody today about about draft experts, and I'm like, you can't be too hard on the draft experts because the GMs don't do any better. Mm-hmm. So it's all 50-50. And if you're 60-40, then you are a franchise that is something. You don't have to be that great as a franchise when you draft. You just have to be a little bit better than everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, no one hits on 100% of their quarterbacks. It doesn't happen because it's pretty much impossible. So,
and it's crazy that position gets analyzed more than any other, and it's no more accurate when you pick them. And they measure their heart. They measure, are they a captain? How many throws? How many years have they been a starter? Colin Cowherd measures, are they good looking? Because, a quarterback that's a leader has to be a good looking dude. And maybe, there's something to all of that, I guess. And yet you still throw all of that in a spreadsheet and you draft Mark Sanchez. A pretty good looking guy.
So I'm hearing Tate Martell first overall pick 2020. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think we know that. And now it may be with Washington State instead of Ohio State. But yeah, number 1 overall pick. And when you look at the the pros or the strengths, obviously he's mobile. Mm-hmm. His hair is mobile. Mm-hmm. Although if he doesn't want it to be, it won't go anywhere. So, would you say his hair is a dual threat?
I think. Huh. I think you're maybe underselling it to suggest that there's only two ways in which
triple threat. Even underselling that. Let's go with the full quintuple threat. So now, that's the quarterback talk. Even though we've had signing day, we've had the that whole Dwayne Haskins thing. Buckeyes got a commitment this past week from. Are we going to say G. Scott rather than Gee Scott?
I meant to watch a YouTube video in which he said his own name, and I did not do that.
It has to be G.
Sure. That's fine.
Okay. You know what? We'll just not talk about him until next week.
Look at us. We're the Sloopcast. We can't say people's names.
Listen to the Sloopcast Mondays and Fridays. Like a 6'3" wide receiver, the number 70 overall player in the 2020 class, which could be a pretty good wide receiver class. I think he reminds me a little bit of Austin Mack. Maybe not as strong yet, but could get there and probably will get there. But, Tom, what I'm kind of annoyed by is a couple of other 2020 receivers. Julian Fleming, a 5-star guy out of Pennsylvania. Raheem Jarrett, a 5-star guy out of Washington, D.C. In the past year, they have both released a top 4. Jarrett released a top 4. And then this past week, just yesterday or the Christmas Day, released a top 6. Fleming went from a top 6 to last week releasing a top 10. They're going in the wrong direction. You can't. It's called a cut down. It's not a cut up. You got to trim these. You can't keep adding. This isn't a pyramid scheme. You have to get to the top. You have to cut down these options. You can't keep adding options. What's next? Here's my top 20 schools. Eventually, you're just here's my top 126.
It would be a top 129 because there's 130 teams, but no one wants to go to UConn, so it'd be top 129.
Do you think they'd want to go to Michigan?
Ooh. Woo.
Here's my top 127 and a half. If I have to have a fallback school, it would be that half of Michigan. But yeah, if Raheem Jarrett looks like a Buckeye lean from everything that he tweets and everything the experts say, Fleming, perhaps a Penn State guy. The crystal balls have him leaning towards Penn State. But if they get one of those two guys to add in with G. Scott and Jackson Smith
and Jigba,
and who's the?
Those are the two who are committed right now.
Yeah, there was not a third,
not yet.
Right. So, I mean, that's a pretty good start for Ryan Day. Although you could say Zach Harrison was a pretty good start for him as well. You've got the quarterback in Jack Miller. Now you add the pieces around him, and you're going to get this 2020 class off to a pretty decent start, in which it's already, the number 3 class in the nation?
Correct. Yes, number 3 in the nation. They only have 6 guys committed right now, but it's the number 6 player in the nation, the number 35 player in the nation, number 65, number 70, number 170, and number 328. So you've got 6 players committed. All 6 of them are 4 stars or better. So you've got a Paris Johnson who's kind of looking around a little bit right now just to kind of... He took a visit to Notre Dame and is just sort of looking around after Urban Meyer left. it sort of, if you want to read into his tweets, he seems like he's still on board with Ohio State.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's been a pretty big development. And the fact that we're saying these tweets from the 16 or 17-year-old, pretty big development as we read into them. But he's very pro-Ohio State, and his tweets are what you would want an Ohio State commit to look like.
Yes.
Even though, as I tell people, never read into a high schooler's tweets, they don't have podcasts.
They don't. That's true. And he definitely has not figured out subtweeting like Tate Martell has. So once he gets to Ohio State,
who among us have
the two guys who are offensive linemen? We talked about the two wide receivers. The two guys who are offensive linemen who are committed for 2020. Paris Johnson is the number one tackle in the country. Luke Whippler from New Jersey is the number one center in the country. So if they can add the number one center in the country after adding Harry Miller this year, after adding Matthew Jones last year, you can play some of those guys at guard, and that's fine. Like if they can add, offensive line is going to be a huge position in need in 2020. They're going to have to not only add top end guys like this, but they're going to have to add depth there. They need to take 5 or 6 guys next year. They need to add another 1 to 2 players this year. That's if you want something to be worried about,
and you do,
if you're looking for something to be concerned about, they need to figure out offensive line recruiting pretty quickly, add a couple guys. They need offensive line and corners next year are going to be a big need.
And there are some very good corners interested in Ohio State in the 2020 class. On signing day, Ryan Day was asked about offensive line recruiting, and basically, in not so many words, is Greg Studrawa doing enough or whatever? And he didn't throw anybody under the bus, but he was very aware, I think he said very well aware of the lack of recruiting on the offensive line, particularly in the state of Ohio, where they have lost guys to Michigan, Clemson,
Notre Dame
always. So where these guys are leaving, even they've lost 2 in-state guys to Clemson over the last couple of years, and Jackson Carman and Matt Bockhorst, I believe. And these are guys that if you think, even if you're not ready to offer them right away, if they can be the fallback guys, to fill out your class, like they needed something this year or they might need in 2020. But yeah, they're going to figure something out on the offensive line in 2020. That's why you've also got to get Ryan Day needs to get his staff put together as quickly as possible. Which brings me to Thursday morning, talking to, like I said, we talked to a couple, 4 guys on defense, Tuff Borland, Draymond Jones, Chase Young, Jonathan Cooper. But we also talked to Greg Schiano, and he was asking about his future, and he said him and Ryan Day have spoke about it. He wants to be at Ohio State. But if they have spoken about it and he wants to be at Ohio State, why would he not just say, yeah, I'll be here next year?
Yeah, I'm going to read you the quotes that kind of stood out to me, because just listening to it, it was like, he's not saying what's going to happen next year, but you don't have to squint real hard to figure out what he's saying about next year. He said, I'm going to keep all that private. Ryan and I have discussed it a little bit. He said, I love being here. My family loves being here. But again, anytime there's a coaching change, whether it's internal or not, a head coach has to select the staff that he feels gives the team the best chance to win. And whatever Coach Day decides to do, certainly his prerogative. So that sure seems like he might be headed out the door. And I was not the only one who interpreted that way. I looked, and several other outlets had read similar things into those comments, and I don't think that's news that's going to upset a lot of Ohio State fans. I mean, this is a defense that has been pretty terrible this year by Ohio State standards, and not very good just by regular standards. Just going through their advanced metrics, 79th in the nation against the run by S&P+, 74th against the pass, 72nd in standard downs, 114th in passing downs, and 124th in the country in explosive plays. And from 2016, Schiano's first year, 15.5 points allowed per game. 2017, 19. So that's 15.5 to 19. This year, 25.7. So they've gone from 15.5 to 25.7. That's an extra touchdown and field goal every single game. This is the thing that's really popped me is you think of Pac-12 teams as, soft teams that don't play any defense. Washington this year has played 13 games and has not allowed more than 24 points in regulation in any of them. Ohio State has allowed more than 24 points in 7 of their 13 games this year in regulation. That's crazy. That is, and it's very easy to say, oh, well, Oregon State was garbage time and blah, blah, and a couple of them were only a few more than 24, but it's just, it has not been good. It has not gotten meaningfully better. The Michigan game was the Michigan game, and that looked pretty darn good against Michigan, but they gave up 24 against Northwestern. They gave up 51 the week before against Maryland. I mean, it's just it has been consistently well below the standard at Ohio State, and I can't really fault people for thinking that maybe they need to go a different direction.
Because if they don't, or if they just accept it, then this becomes the standard. And you saw how crazy that drove Urban Meyer in 2012 and 2013 when that was becoming the standard. And he's like, no. And Everett Withers was like, Urban, hey, I got a job offer. And everyone's like, oh, you did?
Oh, no, you can't go. All the plants will die.
But I also liked what Greg Schiano said. He says, I just go day to day and see where the Lord leads me, which I believe was the synopsis of Highway to Heaven with Michael Landon. And now I'm imagining, like, maybe this is the next step, like reboot Highway to Heaven. I'm not saying it's going to go, maybe it's a lead-in to Brown Thunder.
Highway to Thunder?
Oh, my gosh. That's, like, that could be the night that it's called. Like when NBC has their Thursday nights or whatever, ABC had their, thank God it's Friday. Yeah, we could have Highway to Thunder. We had a third show or a second show before Highway to Heaven reboot. I don't remember what it was, but it was probably
extremely good.
Yes, extremely good. Tom,
I'm just looking at our rundown and the number of listener questions and wondering if we're going to go 6 hours since now we're programming a network in the middle of the season instead of during the off season.
And we haven't really even talked about what the players said today, although I don't know that they really said much of anything. It was interesting talking to the Washington players. We talked to a few of the members of the Washington offense, the quarterback Jake Browning, running back Myles Gaskin, a receiver, a tight end, and an offensive lineman. And the first thing I noticed when I walked in to talk to them, and it's what I told you when I came back out, I'm like, Tom, these guys are small.
Yeah, you said that because you had gone in just a few minutes before I did, and you came back out to pick something up, and you mentioned that, and I thought, all right, is he like seriously like really like notice? And it was like, no, noticeably like their offensive linemen do not look like Ohio State offensive linemen. Like they're smaller, and that's something that has been a little bit of an ongoing thing in college football. There was a big series in, I'm forgetting now which newspaper it was, might have been the San Francisco Chronicle, about the Pac-12 and what a disaster the Pac-12 network has been and all that. And Rick Neuheisel talked in the former UCLA and Colorado coach and Washington coach, talked in that article about how Pac-12 schools don't have the talent base to recruit the big dudes, like the big defensive tackles, the big offensive linemen like the Southern schools do. And Ohio State is sort of an exception there, but Ohio State does too, where you have the big, strong, fast guys. It seems like this could be a little bit of a physical mismatch in the Rose Bowl. Now I would have been a lot more confident about that earlier in the week before we saw Thayer Munford sitting in a golf cart during practice on Thursday.
No clubs.
Maybe just, out repairing divots or something, he used to say. He was sitting out. Our friend Patrick Murphy tweeted tonight. He had an update. He asked Michael Jordan. Jordan said he knows he's rehabbing. He's not sure if he will be available on Tuesday. And he didn't look like someone who was right on the cusp of playing. No. And he's not someone who's been a 3-year starter where he's going to be in that 2,000 rep club where he's just sitting out because he doesn't need the work.
Generally, if somebody is just a tweak or something, they're still going to be out there walking around. We see them all the time walking around the field.
Yes. Or
doing some work in the sand pit. There's no sand pit out there, although it is pretty dirty and sandy on that field. But to just be sitting and chilling, that's not a good not a good it's not a good look. It's not a good
not a good sign. Not a good. He was sitting next to Demetrius Knox,
exactly,
who we know is out because he has a fracture in his foot. So there was one player in a orange limited contact jersey that was Isaiah Pryor. So he's got some kind of a ding, but he was out there running through drills. I mean, he even did a tackling drill. So however limited the contact was, it wasn't very limited. So if I sort of get the sense that if he was really that close, he might be, but he would have been out there. But someone had said they thought it might be a back issue. So if it's a back, then
don't expect
if it's back spasms, then that's something you can come back from. But maybe not. We don't know if it's a disc issue versus back spasms. That's a whole different issue, and we will get to talk to them. The next time we talk to the Buckeyes will be on Saturday. We'll talk to some of the players on Saturday. We'll get to watch practice on Friday, but there's not a media availability that day.
So if he is out, I'm sure they'll go with Josh Allaby. Would you be tempted to go with Nicholas Petit-Frere instead, just to get that look? Because he could be counted on to step in next year. He'll be competing with Allaby, but I would expect them to go with the veteran Allaby, who has been put in situations before this season and played well.
Yeah, he has gotten a little bit. He has not gotten a start yet, but he's gotten brought on in a couple times. Munford, at least once or twice this year, looked like he got rolled up on and had to sit a little bit. And Allaby did a nice job when he was out there. And Allaby was out there running with the ones on Thursday in practice when we were at practice, so we saw him out there. So, but you're going to have if it is Allaby, you got a first-time starter in Allaby at left tackle. Your right guard, Demetrius Knox, is out. So you've got a guy, Wyatt Davis, who is making his second career start. That's 40% of your offensive line has one career start coming into the Rose Bowl. That's not ideal. I watched a lot of Washington in the last week or so, and every time I watched them, I thought, Ohio State can just manhandle this team up front, and it's not going to, they'll be able to wear them down and should win pretty comfortably. If you have two replacement offensive linemen up front, that changes that equation a little bit. And, I think Ohio State's still favored, but I think the last time I looked, the line was 6.5 or something like that. And before I would have said that line is way too low. Now that line seems pretty reasonable.
Although I was talking to Tuff Borland about Washington's offense, he said they're a patient offense. They'll run multiple running backs, multiple tight ends, and I was like, well, isn't that what Michigan was, and doesn't that suit you well? He's like, yeah, they're very similar, but he didn't want to say, like, yes, that suits us well. He's like, that's what I like to play against. And we saw that, we still go back to you gave up 39 points or whatever. But that's the kind of offense that this Ohio State defense would much rather see than the Maryland motion and off balance, stuff, or the spread with the mobile quarterback. I think Washington's offense, it sets up very well. I was writing something for Friday morning. Washington's offense has 5 plays from scrimmage this season of 50 yards or more, and Paris Campbell and Terry McLaurin have 6 pass catches of 50 yards or more, just those two. Mm-hmm. So it's not a big play offense. Myles Gaskin has like one long run, and sure, he'll get a 50-yarder against the Buckeyes, but this is an offense that the Ohio State defense matches up well against.
Yeah, Tuff Borland is exactly the guy to talk to about this, because Tuff Borland is the middle linebacker who's going to be making a lot of plays. Because Washington will get under center. They will do both shotgun and under center. But they'll get under center, one back, run it between the tackles. And this is the kind of defense, or the kind of offense that Ohio State matches up very well against. It's, the Michigan State type offense, Michigan offense. This is a quarterback that's substantially better than anyone Michigan State was running out this year.
In your opinion.
In the opinion of, they scored. They had
in the
games,
opinion of brains.
They had games where they scored 10 points and 16 points, and yes, still they were substantially better than Michigan State for sure. But this is the kind of offense that Ohio State matches up well against. They have a very good defense, and their offense is it's fine.
26 points a game.
Yeah, it's fine. They Jake Browning. I wrote about this on Thursday morning. Jake Browning. You have seen, even if you have not seen Jake Browning, you have seen Jake Browning. He is JT Barrett. He is JT Barrett to a T. He has his arm's okay. It's not great. He's not super accurate. He doesn't have a real strong arm. He's not the fastest guy, but he's mobile. He's very elusive in the pocket. He's great at buying time. So you sort of assume Ohio State's probably going to get some decent pressure on them. And even though they have a good offensive line, but they should be able to generate some pressure. But you got to get him down on the ground because he's very good at running around and buying time and finding a guy down the field. And even if he doesn't complete it, sometimes referees throw flags on those, and you end up getting 15 yards anyway. So that's going to be a key thing to watch. You talked about the running backs. Gaskin is the first player in Pac-12 history to have 4 1,000-yard seasons. So he's not a transcendent star, but he's just a very good, solid running back. He is, and he's averaged 4.9 yards per carry this season, which is good. It's fine. It's not like that's a good, solid season. Their home run hitter is the backup, Salvin Ahmed, who is 6.1 yards per carry, and is someone who they look for in the passing game a lot. They'll give it to him in jet sweeps. I saw some of that. And so you've got a couple guys back there who are good, solid running backs. If you can get Gaskin, if Gaskin can get 5 yards a carry against Ohio State, that's how Washington potentially wins the game, because they will lean on him. He had anytime they played a good team, he had 27, 30 carries, like every single time.
Well, I'd say if that 5 yards per carry is based off of 165-yarder and then not much else, then I think that's fine for Ohio State. The other thing you have to look for with Washington's offense are the trick plays, which we talked to the defensive players quite a bit about, and also the Washington offensive players. Myles Gaskin said he gets nervous when they're called because everything has to go right and it's not the normal people throwing the ball or whatever. Tuff Borland said you can't look for it because then you'll get burnt by other stuff. You just have to manage your keys. But they did well. Who did they play earlier in the season where trick plays? Michigan State is kind of known for that. But they knew they had to be disciplined, and they've had more time for this game than any other. And it's not like they need to be tricked to give up big plays. So it's odd. Like, they do well against trick plays. It's those plays right in their face where things don't go so well.
When you're out of position for the play that you're supposed to be doing, sometimes you're in position for the trick play.
Perfect example. And maybe that's the madness to the method.
If you're looking for an example, well, first of all, this is Chris Peterson, who's the Washington coach. Chris Peterson came to fame as Boise State's head coach. So the 2006 Fiesta Bowl, where they pulled that big upset over Oklahoma, that was the game where they had the Statue of Liberty play. They ran the Wildcat quarterback through a pass, and they just kind of emptied the playbook there. That has been a Chris Peterson staple for years. Hook and lateral. Yep. Yeah, that has been a Chris Peterson staple for years. Their offensive coordinator on Thursday, Bush Hamden, talked about it a little bit. He said it's something that they like to do in practice just because it's kind of fun for the players. Like, it just kind of, if you're doing it, you're thinking about something else. It's kind of something fun and different to do. So they work on them in practice for that reason. But it's a good way to, when you really need something, you pull it out. And like the Washington State game, I think it was right after halftime of that game, they ran a double pass through a lateral to a wide receiver who then threw it 15, 20 yards, something like that, for a touchdown. And that was they trusted a wide receiver to throw a pass in a snowstorm at Washington State. So conditions are going to be much better in the Rose Bowl on Tuesday. So I think you have to kind of just assume that you're going to see something wacky on Tuesday. Yeah,
thanks for bringing that up, Tom. That receiver was Aaron Fuller, who I talked to today. And I'm like, hey, Aaron, you guys do a lot of trick plays. Have you ever done any? Like, have you ever gotten to throw the football? He's like, yeah, I've done it. I'm like, oh, yeah, I win. And he's like, the Apple Cup. I'm like, oh. And you can even read the transcript. I think my next question was like, that was you? And his answer is, yep. And it's like, you know what? I don't watch a lot of Washington football. I don't watch a lot of Pac-12 football because I watch cable television. I don't watch internet television that the Pac-12 might be on. So I can't be blamed, even though I assume the Apple Cup was on national television, but I was busy, and it was the weather was terrible, and it was a bad game. So I can't keep track of every single receiver who has thrown a pass. I'm sorry. I apologize, Aaron Fuller. You didn't have to be such a jerk to me.
I wasn't going to mention it. You told me that story earlier, and I just told the story of what happened in the game. I wasn't going to
me look bad, Tom.
I wasn't going to blow you up. So
through actions of my own. That's the worst kind.
No one's actions are worse than yours.
Should we get to the listener questions? Are you ready for that?
We should. First one. Are these all from Lance Not Lance?
Yeah.
Yes. Lance Not Lance at LANTZNOTLANCE. First, are you a little sore about leaving cold, rainy weather for upper 60s and sun? I gotta say, I'm fine with it.
You fine with it? I was a little upset that it was only going to be in the 60s this week until we were out at practice today, and it was freaking awesome. It wasn't too hot. The sun was out. It was perfect.
I just didn't plan out very well, and I went down to interviews on Thursday morning with like a golf shirt on, but with like a pullover sweater over it. And I was in there for about 5 minutes, and it was like, oh, it's really warm in here. Oh, this is not. I dressed terribly for this. So yeah, once I got in a short sleeve shirt, it was a very pleasant day all around.
Yeah, I like it. I would never want to live here because I like to get places by car.
Yes,
the roads, these highways, they're terrible. There's bumps everywhere. I don't know how cars even exist out here. You would think they would just constantly bottom out. There's no suspension. It's terrible. I mean, the entire shuttle ride today to practice was like riding a wooden roller coaster. Just like constant, bumps.
And the best part of practice on Thursday was coming back at 1 p.m. on a Thursday during a holiday week, and it was just solid traffic in 3 lanes of the highway. We were in the HOV lane, so we could zip through because we were on a bus, but Thursday at 1 p.m. during a holiday week, and there's just a line of traffic. Like, if you don't know what a paradox is, it is, basically trying to square two things that are completely inconsistent. My absolute unironic love of the Rose Bowl and my seething hatred of Los Angeles and how quickly the novelty of Los Angeles wears off, that is a paradox.
We got out of the airport and we had an Uber ride, and for about 15 minutes it kept saying, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes away, and it's just torturous to watch this, and then to be in this car where you might die because of the way people around here have to drive. And the other thing I saw, and we'll eventually get back to the talking on the football stuff. We're in the right lane. People in the left lane turn right in front of us to go into like parking lots. And that seems to be a thing where they just come around you and expect you to stop and not T-bone them. I don't care for that.
The best part for sure was waiting for the Uber and the app saying 4 minutes and then 7 minutes, and it was like those recruits with their lists.
Oh.
Like, you can't go from a top 4 to a top 10. You cannot go from 3 minutes to 7 minutes.
I should have known when it said your driver is Raheem Jarrett.
5 stars though. 5-star review. Next one. Will there be a Michigan Wednesday or Thursday?
Seeing as how it is now 6:24 Pacific on a Thursday, no. I don't always do one after Ohio State Michigan. Even then, I did do a Michigan Monday this past week, which should suffice for a while. But it's always fun to write about Michigan.
I think you gotta wait to see who's their coach next year before you write something else.
Yep.
Final one from Lance Not Lance. How do I explain to my wife that games like Miami versus Wisconsin aren't completely meaningless so I can watch them? I mean, that game's over, so...
It looked pretty meaningless. What I would say is, like, if you love me, you will let me do these things that are important. And if she can't handle that, and if she says, well, if you would love me, you wouldn't, you would be like, I used that first. That's mine.
Are you familiar with rubber and glue? I think that my personal keys to success in terms of football viewing are you pick your battles, you make your choices. Right. And when you're not watching something, just let people know, hey, there's a game on, but I want to go do something with you. There's a game on tonight, but we're going to go see a movie. We're going to go have dinner. That's okay. I personally have made the decision, Sundays are for family, Saturdays are for football. So I don't watch the NFL, which is good for 2 reasons. Because then I don't have to watch the NFL, which is also good.
So, like, if you were home right now, and as we're talking, we've got Baylor and Vanderbilt playing, which you wouldn't be watching, you'd be like, man, I'd really like to watch this Baylor-Vanderbilt, but okay, we'll go see your family.
Yeah. Well, I'll get the...
And then you're with their family the entire time thinking, out loud, man, I wonder what's happening in that Vanderbilt game, but I don't care because I'm just glad to be here.
Since we're talking about a game that happened in the past, let me give you some free advice. Skip the TCU game.
Yes. Oh.
Please skip the TCU game and watch the Wisconsin game instead.
Good advice.
Next one from @freak_KE. With the time crunch between the Sugar Bowl and when Ohio State starts classes, do you think it is possible that Justin Fields picks Ohio State without ever visiting?
And we did the math on this. Ohio State's classes start Monday, January 7th. So there's definitely time. And I believe they could do official visits.
Yeah, if he's in the transfer portal, right. I believe he can
Ohio
do an official
State can
visit.
Fly him out. There's definitely time, but it's almost time to where it would just confirm that this is where you want to be.
Yeah, because he's going to be playing in the Sugar Bowl, which it's after the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day. So presumably they're going to do what Ohio State does and get on a plane and go home right after the game. So he gets home early morning hours of January 2nd. He would have to enroll. That's a Wednesday. He would have to enroll at Ohio State the next Monday. So you pretty much have to have your decision made at that point, because if he's down to Ohio State or Oklahoma, that's a real. You go to Ohio State on the 3rd and 4th and Oklahoma on the 5th and 6th, and then you decide, okay, I'm going to somewhere to. I mean, that would be. It's going to be a difficult choice regardless. You sort of get the sense that if that's his timetable and he's going to try and do this in 6 days, he probably already has a sense what he wants to do.
Plus, the first week is syllabus bullcrap anyway. You don't need to be there.
That's exactly the message you want to send to new players. Look, classes, like
Justin Fields be like, well, like Coach Day said, the first week is syllabus bullcrap anyway, and you don't need to be there. So I knew I had time.
So did we just break news that Elliot Uzelac is coming back to coach the offensive line at Ohio State? Did that just happen?
Co-OC
Elliot Uzelac, yes. Next one from @ChipMinnick. Have you been to In-N-Out Burger yet? If not, why not?
We have not, because we don't have a car here, because we get shuttled everywhere, and there is no stinking shuttle to In-N-Out, which I think, now that Chip brings it up, is also bullcrap.
The actual answer is we will probably go at some point. We will probably go eat in some local fine places at some point during this trip. We got in late Wednesday night, spent all day Thursday covering press conferences, covering practice, writing, recording this podcast. We will have more free time. I think Friday we have just practices in the morning and that's it. So we would potentially have time to do something like that later in the week. But yeah, there's nothing that's super close. We're in downtown LA, basically right across the street from the Staples Center and LA Live. So downtown LA is not like a great place to let me be careful with how I say it.
Yeah.
It is not it is in the process of being redeveloped, but has not been fully redeveloped. It's not what you would call a walkable neighborhood at night, probably in some ways.
From what I've seen during the day, also not then.
Yeah, it's not. There is not a In-N-Out Burger right down the street from us. There's not, disappointingly, there's not a Del Taco near here. So there's some other stuff we're gonna have to look at. We have to. We'll probably have to Uber somewhere. But yeah, renting a car here would be unnecessary, and also it costs, I think, $50 a day to park at the hotel. So that would be kind of ludicrous. So yeah, so we do not have a car. So that's why.
We're 15 years old.
At Van Gogh Zero, how much crap would OSU be getting if Nick Bosa had been suspended from the college football playoffs for steroids as opposed to the lack of attention to Dexter Lawrence?
I don't know that there is a lack of attention because he's even speaking with the media, which is, I don't know, refreshing, insane, But if it was Nick Bosa, it would be bigger. If it was Ohio State, it would be bigger. But I think this is being covered, and I'm surprised he's talking, frankly.
I was very surprised that he talked. I mean, that's a bold choice, and that is a coach showing that he really trusts his player.
Be right. Yeah.
And he maintained his innocence, and Dabo Swinney maintained his innocence, that he really didn't think he did anything wrong, didn't knowingly do anything wrong. The second test did come back on all three players positive, so that with the exact same results as the first test. So he is definitely going to be suspended for that game. It's. I think that you as an Ohio State fan probably see the negative Ohio State stuff more than you see the negative Clemson stuff, because a lot of the negative Ohio State stuff is not just coming from ESPN. It's also coming from Michigan fans who are tweeting, and people are retweeting and quote tweeting, and Penn State fans and all the people who love to twist the knife on Ohio State whenever they get a chance. So you see it more from that perspective. And we've had ESPN on watching some of the bowl games as we've been recording and writing today. And they did a decently long segment on it between a couple of the bowl games. So it's certainly not getting ignored. But I have not seen real over the top. Is Clemson the dangerous loose cannon program? Lyle Alzado file footage, all that. I haven't seen any of that.
I think if this was Ohio State, that would get put on the litany of things that people like to charge Urban Meyer with. It would be one more thing. Whereas this, you've got Dabo going to bat for his players, putting them out there because he believes in them and trusts them, and it's almost like a positive, heartwarming story about a young man who's been falsely peed into a cup twice now. Or it's just once, but it's two samples.
Same question. This is also from Van Gogh Zero. Same question. If some backup OSU players were the ones who had killed the guy as opposed to LSU players, that was a. If you're not familiar with that story, there was an incident in Baton Rouge where there was a shooting, and the police investigated and determined that they had. I think it was an attempted robbery that they had.
Yeah, they met to do like an internet purchase swap for electronics, and the non-football players, that I don't know if he was the buyer or the seller, pulled a gun, and then one of the LSU football players pulled his gun and shot the dude. And yeah, I mean, that's a terrible situation. That's why cities have like monitored areas for your Craigslist swaps, where cameras are there or police are nearby. And that's just a terrible situation all around. Would it be more magnified if it was Ohio State? I think so. Even the gun situation would be blown up. This has seemed to... I'm surprised at how quickly this disappeared, although we've kind of been in a bubble.
Yep.
So I don't know. I don't know what the talk shows are saying.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's gone.
Yeah, it did not... It seemed like it was there and gone in about 24 or 36 hours, which... And again, like you said, we have not been sitting in front of computers or sitting in front of ESPN watching talking head shows. Not, like we do all the time when we're at home.
We love our ESPN.
I don't know what Stephen A. Smith thinks about this, and I'm breaking out in hives without knowing. I think that again, I was a little surprised at that, but I think you can, if the police did an investigation and that's what they determined, and the police determined it was a justified shooting, then that, sort of makes a lot of the questions go away.
Yeah.
And the gun, I assume the gun was not an illegal gun or a stolen gun or whatever, then there's really not much of a story.
And when Ohio State fans look at it, as we've seen in these last two questions, it's, well, what if this had been Ohio State? And you try to put yourself in that position, but it's the police saying, it's settled,
mm-hmm.
and so why try to doubt that happened? I mean, it happens all the time,
mm-hmm.
and if it's settled, then it's maybe that's why it's gone and it's disappeared.
Next one from info 348-78048. Can we please get you a new username, please? That's a lot of numbers to read. People keep talking about Marcus Freeman as linebacker coach / defensive coordinator, but he seemingly was bad at Purdue. Also, can he really recruit, or is that all fickle too? Insights? I don't know how fair it is to judge someone on what they did at Darrell Hazel's Purdue.
Yeah.
That was, that's like taking the guy who went to Chernobyl after the meltdown and being like, well, he didn't do much with the place. Like, well, literally everything is on fire and they're losing to MAC teams. And I think that it's reasonable to judge him based on the Cincinnati stuff, because Fickell has done a very good job building that program at Cincinnati. They've recruited well. They've played pretty well defensively. They've had very good and consistently improving results on the field, which is really what you want to see. I think that there's never a certainty that you can give a certain guy, especially if you are a coach, a coordinator on the side of the ball that the head coach also specializes in your side of the ball. You never quite know how much credit to assign or blame to assign. It's very much like the Ohio State coaching staff and Urban Meyer. We've talked for years about Urban Meyer is going to have some input on what they do offensively. I'm sure Luke Fickell has some serious input on what Cincinnati is doing defensively, but whatever they're doing, it's working. So that I think that both of us would consider Freeman a pretty strong candidate for Ohio State if that position does open up. One or both of the linebacker / defensive coordinator positions open up.
And you can't really... It's not right to judge somebody on like their first full-time coaching job. Urban Meyer as a receivers coach at Notre Dame wasn't as good as Urban Meyer, the head coach at Bowling Green. So these guys get better or they get out of the business. And so far, Marcus Freeman has taken the proper trajectory. And I think you do have to give him some credit for what's going on at Cincinnati. And I go back to talking to the Purdue linebackers, a few years ago when they loved the way he challenged them. And everything they told me was exactly what Ohio State linebackers had told me previously about Luke Fickell. And so it's, for me, Marcus Freeman is like Luke Fickell 2.0. But let's also not forget, Buckeye fans wanted Luke Fickell out of here for quite a while, to the point where Urban would be asked in 2013, maybe 12 or 13, is Luke Fickell's job safe? And you think back to a couple years, you're like, how could that be? But that's how it was.
Mm-hmm. And that 2013 defense was pretty terrible. Not 2018 terrible, but it was pretty bad at times. The end of that season was not pretty. The Michigan game, they won 42-41. Lose to Michigan State 34 420, maybe. I mean, they gave up 30 points to Michigan State, and they gave up 30-something points to, was it 41? They lose 41-35 in the Orange Bowl. It was the only time in Ohio State history that they've scored 35 points and lost. So they gave up more than 35 points in that game. And, those results now, after this season, those results don't pop off the screen. But at the time, that was cataclysmic for an Ohio State defense, because they were not scoring 60 points every week like they did this year. So, last one from @Aaron J. Wenzel. Which Rose Bowl catch do you think is more iconic? David Boston's go-ahead touchdown in '97 or Jake Ballard's leaping grab in 2010? My gut says Boston, but I feel as if most OSU fans would say Ballard because of recency bias.
I would say most would say Boston if they were alive for it. Or I think it's Boston. I mean, that's like the greatest catch ever until Holy Buckeye, almost.
Yeah,
you got the Terry Glenn stuff in '95, but that catch, that whole drive, all of the pass interferences, and then that catch and the strut, that's for me, that's it.
I mean, I'm biased because I was at the game in '97, so that's always going to be it for me. But I don't, like you said, if you were alive and remember the 1997 game, I don't know who would possibly argue against that. That's like the, which game was more impressive against Illinois, Keith Byers in 1984 or Eddie George in 1995. And I was too young to have watched the Keith Byers game in 1984. It didn't register at all to me. So,
well, I was at the one in '95, and that was more impressive because I was there.
So I think we've just completely confirmed everything. So,
but the Jake Ballard, was it like third and long at that point?
I think it was third and long. See, the fact that we even have to have this conversation is the answer. Yeah. I'm remembering it being third and long, and he had to go up and catch it, but it was like in the middle of the field. It was like at the 30-yard line. It wasn't a touchdown. It was just kind of a big play on a drive, but it wasn't the game-winning touchdown.
Yeah, it's not.
And it was not that David Boston catch denied Arizona State a national championship, and Ohio State got first place votes at the end of that last year. At the end of that year, Florida got most of them, but I think Ohio State had a vote and a half or something in the AP poll. So
they should claim it as a half national championship, like Michigan does.
There was a at the time there was a sweatshirt that Long sold that was an Ohio State helmet and a Florida helmet, and it said "Let's play." And that was a touchdown. It was the game-winning touchdown. It was a higher stakes game for a better Ohio State season against a better opponent. Like I don't think there's really an argument here unless you're too young to remember.
And the other thing is Ohio State didn't win those games back then. They didn't win those big games.
No.
When was the last time? That was the first big game I think I ever saw Ohio State win.
John Cooper in bowls. I mean, John Cooper in bowls. That was the second bowl game that he won, right? Because they won the Holiday Bowl against BYU in 1993, and that was a crappy December 28th game, and they barely beat a crappy BYU team.
I was at the '94 Michigan game that they won, but Ohio back then, great things didn't necessarily happen to Ohio State from 1980 to 1997 with that Rose Bowl. And so I think it's more than just a catch. That was finally a release that it's okay for great things to happen at Ohio State.
Yeah, if you go back, they had big wins, but they always happened in September.
Yeah.
They just beat the brakes off of a top 5 Penn State team that year, but it was, September 28th or October 4th or something like that. By the time the season ended, every year they lost. Everyone remembers 2-10-1 against Michigan. John Cooper lost bowl games every year. They missed a bowl in 88. They lost in 89. They lost in 90. That was that horrendous Liberty Bowl against Air Force. They lost in 91. They lost in 92. They won. They beat BYU in 93 in the Holiday Bowl.
They lost to Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee.
Yeah, they lost to Alabama in 94 in the Citrus Bowl. They lost to Tennessee in 95 in the Citrus Bowl. And then the year after, they lost to Florida State in the Sugar Bowl. He only won 3 bowl games.
Texas A&M.
They beat Texas A&M in the Sugar Bowl. That was close.
It shouldn't have been.
It shouldn't have been because they were up big and they just farted it away.
That was the best team in Ohio State history to that point.
Yeah. So, yeah, but that was... It was so unusual for Ohio State to be that good, to win a bowl game, period, win a big game that late in the season, period.
And that late in the game.
To come back. Because that was... Everyone remembers that game as a classic. That game was kind of a turd for about 55 minutes. It was 14-10 Ohio State. Demetrius Stanley had a long touchdown reception in the first half, and then I forget who scored the second touchdown, but they were up 14-10 late in that game, and Jake Plummer led Arizona State down the field, and they scored a go-ahead touchdown with 2.5 minutes left, something like that.
You can't cut the head off of a snake.
Yeah. Oh, you can. I can still hear Brent Musburger screaming that, and it was to be in that stadium. It was just like a gut punch when they scored that touchdown because that was a team that looked like it was going to be a national championship team. Then they clinched the Rose Bowl, and then they lose to Michigan. So it was already like, oh, here we go again. And then to go to the Rose Bowl and be leading most of the game, and then with 3 minutes left, they fall behind again, and it was like, oh, they're going to do the full Cooper. They start 11-0 and finish 11-2. That was every season. So for them to at the end of that game come back, go right down the field against a good Arizona State team. Like you hear Arizona State and it's like, oh, it's an okay program. It's not
All-American Derek Rogers. Neutralized. Orlando Pace.
Yeah, Pat Tillman was on that team. I mean, Jake Plummer was the quarterback. I mean, that was a good Arizona State team. And that Arizona State team beat Nebraska that season.
Yeah,
when that was
crazy.
Like, that was like one of the most shocking upsets of the 90s. And that was a great Arizona State team. So for all of that stuff to be going against them, and then they go right down the field and score the touchdown, that's still in the last 30 years or so, that's still one of the top 5 to 10 moments, period.
Just look at how much time we spent on it and compare that to Jake Ballard's catch. It's like,
which neither of us completely remember exactly the
Do you remember what the play-by-play guys were saying at that point?
No.
I mean, do you remember that entire drive before the David Boston catch where there's pass interferences and sometimes there weren't? And Dick Vermeil was saying the refs should donate their checks to charity for not calling this stuff.
Yep.
That's one of those things that is just going to that's imprinted, like in your memories, in your soul, in terms of being just growing up as a Buckeye, where Jake Ballard, great catch. If he doesn't catch that, whatever, you lose to Jeremiah Masoli. Who cares?
That was not a season that. I mean, Ohio State fans look back at that as a great season because they won the Rose Bowl, and very much like this season. If you win the Rose Bowl, this is a great season. But that's not one of the all-time fantastic seasons in Ohio State history. So, yeah, I don't think there's much of a debate.
And I don't mean who cares. Obviously, you do care, but that's also one of the great lines from Jim Tressel before the game. Like, how are you going to handle Oregon's up-tempo offense? And Tressel said we have an up-tempo defense. So it's like he always had some good stuff. But I think that's going to do it. Thank you. We are coming to you live from a hotel room overlooking a Los Angeles highway, which is not too packed right now.
We can't see the Hollywood sign anymore because it's dark.
I thought that would be lit up.
Yeah, maybe not.
Huh. Well, they don't have a lot of water here, so I guess that means you can't have a lot of electricity. But that's going to be the show tomorrow. We've got more interview sessions. No, Saturday.
Yeah, interview sessions on Saturday, and then we'll have.
We get some practice Friday.
We'll do practice Friday, interviews Saturday, and media day on Sunday. Right, I think. So I would guess we'll do another podcast before the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, we kind of owe you a couple.
Yeah, we'll be back at some point. We'll figure out a schedule. When we have something to say, we'll say it, and we'll probably do some shorter ones like we did Michigan Week.
We do some Facebook Live at some point
and then we'll have a post game as well. So we'll have plenty more podcasts to come. So subscribe now so you don't miss any of them.
Yep. Thanks. Have a good night, everybody. Good day.